Hello, hello, I am live. Yes, I love it. Hello, everybody, to my weekly live talk on the topic of unschooling and homeschooling. And here she is, my guest. Hold on a second. Live. Hi, here she is.
Hey, how
Hi.
are you?
I'm so good. How are you?
I am so good. It's so good to be here. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for following my invitation. Your name is
Absolutely.
AmyLee Westervelt, and
Yes,
my
ma'am.
name is Irene Kainz. Um, I am I am holding I'm facilitating. This is the word. I'm sorry. I'm facilitating this live talks on unschooling once a week on my Instagram channel, and I also downloaded them afterwards onto YouTube. So whoever wants to rewatch that, it's possible on YouTube. My intention for those talks is to raise consciousness and awareness for the topic of unschooling and homeschooling. And I'm so happy to have you, AmyLee, here from the United States, from Georgia, where homeschooling and unschooling has much more tradition than here in Europe. So I love to, you know, to have the awareness how it could be for Europeans if they watch, and also for maybe some people from the US or from the other side of the Atlantic, to get an insight of how this topic is seen everywhere differently on this world, on this planet. So, do you want to introduce yourself a little bit, AmyLee?
Sure. So my name is AmyLee Westervelt, and I live here in Savannah, Georgia, outside of Savannah, Georgia, in rural Georgia, in a little town called Rincon in Effingham County. And I have 5 children, 10 years and under. And my husband and I have decided to unschool them. And this is really interesting because I actually, and I don't know if you know this, I have my degree in elementary education. I actually taught elementary education for 6 years. So I have the educational background to traditionally homeschool my kiddos. Savannah Bananas, that's right. To traditionally homeschool, and yet despite having the materials to do that, my husband and I have found that our children have thrived tremendously with an unschooling model. I'll tell you some of the cool things that have happened as a result of that as we get into this conversation. But really what it comes down to is child-led learning has been so profoundly impactful for my family, for my children, for their confidence, for who they've become as people, for them really starting to take ownership of the world that they're going to inherit from us, their parents, whenever it comes time for them to be ready to go out and do that.
Mm. Was this your main reason why you decided for homeschooling or unschooling? This idea of having the kids being self-led from the very beginning?
Well, I think that originally, I mean, like a lot of people, I think we started out wanting to traditionally homeschool, right? Like when you're a teacher, the idea of being able to buy all the curriculum and put the posters up and all that stuff, like there's definitely an aspect of that, there's an I would say imaginary kind of like romantic piece of that, as a parent.
Mm-hmm.
And what you find is that, you have as many kids as we have. We have a crazy life. We love to travel. We have a small child, one of our children who has special needs. He has a very rare disease. And so, I would say for us, the initial foray into unschooling was more about necessity. It was more about how do we keep track of all these kids and keep them safe and loved and all these things. Like something had to give. And so between me running my business from home and my husband taking care of all these children, it didn't lend itself to the traditional model of go learn the lesson plan, go sit the kids at the table. They're all different ages. They all have very different aptitudes. My oldest daughter is 10 now. She's always been a very traditional student. She loves workbooks. She loves to write in things. She loves to do the project. But my son, who is just behind her, he's 8 years old. That's not him at all. You can't get him to sit and do really anything unless he's interested in it. So he has a completely different model. And when we were using traditional materials, he did another program. So my daughter did Moving Beyond the Page, which was whole language based, rather than phonics based. And then my son, we did Timberdoodle, which is much more of a hands-on because he's like a kinesthetic genius. Now, being from, Europe, I'm sure you're very familiar with Howard Gardner and the multiple intelligences, right? And the idea that Gardner talks about how there's all kinds of different ways that a child can be a genius. It isn't
Actually,
just...
I'm not familiar with him.
Oh, I highly recommend you check out Gardner's multiple intelligences because they're very much used in Europe and in Scandinavian countries especially, that they test children on other things. Like music is, something you can be a genius in, as well as interpersonal communication, kinesthetic learning, so all of the, but in America, it's very much just about the academics. And so, so my son, he can look at a picture and then go build that out of Legos with like all of the moving pieces and everything else, right? So each one of the children has a different need. My third child, she's very social and she likes learning to be very jump around and goofy and fun. So we started to realize that there was no way that we were going to have this romanticized, all the kids sitting at the table, kumbayaing and laughing and giggling while we taught. It just wasn't going to be possible. And so but we also, my husband and I, were both very much lifelong learners ourselves. And so our kids started to notice that we would be reading all the time, or we'd be doing, research about something, or we'd be watching a YouTube video, and they started to really kind of get into that themselves. And we noticed that even though we were not so great, this was mostly in the summer because homeschoolers tend to teach all year round. We don't really have a break, right? We noticed that the more that we let go of the traditional schooling, the more the kids wanted to learn in other ways. And so we started to recognize, gosh, every time we make dinner, we just naturally talk to our children in a way that sets them up for success and learning about whatever's going on. And so we found that that was just our natural way, and they were learning from that. And it's interesting, this morning, so my 5-year-old, sorry, my dogs are barking at the neighbor. That'll stop in a second. One of the things about having 5 kids is you have 5 dogs too. Sorry. And they're literally right behind my head. But so my 5-year-old has taught himself to read. We have not done anything. We haven't shown him letters. We haven't given him phonics exercises. The kid just learned how to read just from being around. So today, my husband said, you're not going to believe this. Caleb was just looking at Amazon Prime, and he was searching, trying to spell out words to find movies that he wanted to watch. So he was trying to spell, not only is he reading, but he's now teaching himself how to spell, which to me is like, it's crazy. And there are so many people that poo-poo what we do and say like, oh, your kids aren't going to learn anything. But it's like, my 10-year-old read all the Harry Potter books in a week and a half. I cannot keep enough reading material in this house for her. Like when we start to really see children as people who have their own journeys and have their own capability, and start to really recognize what it is that they love, that they're doing, and nurture that, that's really when we're starting to see that genius come through. And we're really starting to notice them come into their own right. It doesn't have to be, let's go to high school and then let's figure out what we want to do with our lives. They could start that right now. And my daughter's already starting to show interest in certain topics, which of course we will continue to nurture with her. My son is Mr. Builder. He wants to build all the things, you know? So when my husband goes out and he's working on making garden boxes, guess who he brings with him? And guess who he's showing how to use a circular saw? And guess who, you know, is now measuring for his own projects? So people think like, oh, but you know, that's not traditional school. But put my kid up against any kid in a traditional school or in a traditional homeschool, and you're going to be really shocked at just how, you know, much they hold their own, if not excel.
Oh, this is so beautiful what you just said. Thank you for sharing that. And it really touches my heart deeply. And it's also what my experience is and what I'm like diving into for so many years now. My son is 13 and we are doing this non-schooling thing for 6 years ever. He should have been in school here in Austria. Yeah. And to me, and probably to you too, you're a coach. You're a, how do you describe yourself? I just wrote it down. A dream design coach, right?
Yeah.
A dream design coach. You're also doing human design. I want to get into that topic relating to unschooling later on as well.
Absolutely.
But, you know, being a coach, and we are both coaches, we believe in this infinite human potential. And we believe that this is there from the very beginning on. We are potential. I mean, we come to this planet, into this body as pure potential. And so as long we don't distract that and we don't condition and break, you know, this natural connection, being a channel to source for our potential, there isn't anything really we need to learn. We just need to be creative with whatever we get through, right? So to me, that's the idea of like, I mean, and of course, this is an ideal. Of course, it's an ideal because we as parents, we already are conditioned a lot and we have our conditioned habits. And of course, this has effects to our children and it doesn't keep it pure anymore. But idealistically, this is how my approach is towards that. I mean, actually, we wouldn't need to teach them anything. I mean, look at how kids learn to walk, how they learn to talk, and those are two topics that are accepted in all the societies, that there doesn't need to be a curriculum, that we don't need to teach our children to move this one foot to the other one and to move the hip and whatever, you know. Here we naturally see that they just observe others, adults or not adults, and find their way of coping with it and getting towards it and figuring it out. Language, the same thing. And actually, if we would keep this this field open, you just showed it, it would be the same thing with reading and writing. It would be the same thing with everything, basically. And if kids have questions, they ask.
Oh, they ask. Absolutely.
Yeah. So this is, and the more and more I dive into this, it is still, even though it's like a small percentage of families who practice unschooling, it's still already a huge field where you really can dive into. And those stories, I mean, you hear them a lot, that kids teach themselves so many things. And
well,
then
and I think that, oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I think that it comes back to what you said before. You know, we're both spiritually aware coaches, and I think you have to think about, like, what is your philosophy of your role in what is your role in the trajectory of your child? Because if you believe that your child is this plant that you planted, that you have to water, and you have to make sure it has enough sunlight, and you have to make sure that it gets a bigger pot when it needs one, you know, then this is going to feel very unorthodox to you, and it's probably going to feel negligent, for lack of a better word, if that's the philosophy you take. However, if you see your child as a plant that appears in your world, right? And that it's more about them having their own experience, which you can give them perspective based on where you've been, offer them accountability, let them see the back of their head when they can't see it, and offer a little bit of direction in terms of education. But at the end of the day, they're souls just like we are. They're not like mini souls, right? Like they're still the same type of entity that we are. They just are less acclimated to the planet this time around. And so when you look at it from that perspective and you recognize that you may be dealing with a soul that is much older than you are, right? It's like you've worked at this company longer, but they got hired at a higher management position than you. So the first couple weeks, you're showing them where the break room is, you're showing them how to punch in and punch out. But after a while, they're telling you what to do, you know? And so when you look at it from that perspective that your children are starseeds in their own right, that's when you're like, okay, how can I be a good coworker, or how can I be a good schoolmate, right? Because I'm on my own journey. I'm in, you know, class adult personal development, and they're in class learning how to communicate, but we're in the same one-room schoolhouse. So when I look at it from that perspective, I don't feel so, how do I put this? I don't say responsible, but whether or not they learn doesn't mean anything about me anymore. It's about them. It's about their experience. It's about their joy. It's about them really taking in the pride of knowledge rather than me taking pride in them having knowledge. And that means that I'm doing a good job. You see the difference? Like it's about them, and it's about what they get to bring into themselves. And when they learn something new and they tell us about it, they are so excited. They don't see learning as that thing that they have to sit at the table and do so that they can go play. They see learning as the thing they get to do because they exist. Like learning is the gift. Learning is the reward. They love to know new things. And I just don't think that, in my opinion, from what I saw when I was in the public school system, and for those of you who are joining late, I did teach. I do have a degree. I did teach in a public school as well as private school. And what I don't see those kids having is the pride of learning for learning's sake. I just don't see that. Now, that's only my, my experience. I'm sure there are lots of schools that are that way, but in my experience where I taught, I didn't see that. And it would break my heart if my children fell out of learning, if my children felt like reading was a chore, when those are tools and gifts and a magic carpet that's available to them at any moment. I would be heartbroken if that was, perverted for them.
Oh, I love how you put those things. It's beautiful, and that's actually how we titled our talk today. Learning is a reward. This is what you were just mentioning, and I think it's beautiful. And when you say that, I have this longing and desire. I wish I could have experienced it from the very beginning, because for me, it was a chore, and I have so many. I mean, I know so many people who have experienced it this way, and I see so many children who still experience it this way. And so if learning, if we tap into this magic of learning and seeing it as this flying carpet, oh my goodness, I love this analogy. I love this picture. Oh,
Jeff, that happened to me too. Jeff McMahon just said, I wasted so much time waiting for others to complete work. Yeah, I was in the extended learning program when I was little. And what happens, I believe a lot of times schools end up being daycares for kids so that parents can go work. It's subsidized daycare so parents can go work. And so a lot of times it's one teacher minding all of these children and you're already done and you're so ready to do the next thing, and you have to wait because the teacher's still working with kids that are at different levels. Now, do I think that scaffolding and kids who, you know, are higher helping kids that are lower is a bad thing? No, I think it's brilliant. And we use it all the time with our kids. My daughter is an incredible reader. My son is a great reader, but he's not confident. So we pair them together when they read, because he gets the benefit of seeing how confident she is. And he learns the words because he's hearing her read. But that being said, yeah, I think that school and the homogenization of school does such a disservice to children, because there is so much differentiated instruction. There is kids learn so differently. I mean, so differently. You look at the difference between visual learners and auditory learners and kinesthetic learners. Can you imagine, what is that saying? If you judge a fish by its ability to climb a tree, it's going to fail every time. That's basically what the traditional school system does. You've got a kid who's an incredible artist who's going to grow up and be like famous for their art, and yet we're giving him a hard time because he's not great at math. Like, why? Why do we have to be these well-rounded people if we already know what our zone of genius is and we know what our passion is? That to me just doesn't make sense.
Yeah, there are a few things you mentioned. I mean, the first thing is that if we still want to keep the schooling system like it is, then let's be at least honest that it is mostly because the parents need time to do their work and have something where they can put their kids. So this is the one thing, and the other thing is this putting an average level onto everything. I mean, look, at least I feel it. This is such a huge deal. I have dealt all my adult life to get away with, really, and find myself again into my zone of genius, and still there is such a deep pattern within me that even feels comfortable because it's known of mediocrity. And so many people I see have that. And this is why we don't really are capable to deal with those big issues and problems in this world we need to deal with. I mean, it's urgent. It's really urgent. And I do see that those kids coming, into this world, they already have so many answers to those issues within them, and we can learn a lot from them.
Absolutely. And I would argue that they get put in our path just as much as we get put in theirs.
Yes. So I want to talk about human design. You also work with human design, and I imagine that you, as a mother of 4 or 5 kids, you see also the individual characteristic traits mirrored in the human design chart. The two of us, I'm not sure if you remember, but we had already some months ago some contact, and we talked about human design. We are both 5-1 generators, right? So what is your experience, regarding human design and being with kids in the setting of unschooling, and your human design and the individual needs and all of that? Do you have any insights?
Absolutely. I just want to answer Jeff's question real quick, where he says, are teachers typically capable of discovering different learning styles? So unfortunately, the answer is yes. In school, we learned all about differentiated instruction, least restrictive environment, all of those things. And then you get into the actual school, and the bureaucracy takes over. So you're in school, you're learning about all these amazing ways to support your hypothetical kids. And you're really learning all of this stuff. And then you get into the actual school and they throw all that out the window and they're like, yeah, that's great. We don't have time for that. You need to do this. You need to teach, because teachers are the ones who are being graded. When kids have standardized testing, it's the teachers that they're testing. It's not the kids. They're testing to see how well the teachers are and whether or not they need to give them raises or fire them or whatever, because it's all about bureaucracy. So to answer your question, Def, yes, you've got these incredible men and women who go into teaching, who have these dreams of really changing lives. And unfortunately, they get into the school system, and the school system just completely dashes those hopes. And a lot of teachers end up burnt out. They spend way more money on their classrooms than they ever expected they would have to. They're barely, living above the poverty line. And at the same time, they're not able to make the impact that they want to make. So just to answer that question. But back to your question. No, go ahead.
And I have the same, as we hear the same thing from teachers here in Europe. It's exactly the same thing. So I want to say that as well. It's not only where your experience.
So when it comes to human design and my children, something that really helped me was a book that I recommend for everyone. It's called How to Parent the Child You Have, and it's all about human design and children. And what I learned of my 5 children, I have, let me see if I get this right. I have 3 manifesting generators, and I have a generator, and I have a projector. So basically, if you know human design, you know that manifesting generator and generator are basically just generators. I'm a generator. My husband's a manifesting generator. So we've got this big old house full of generators, and my little boy is a projector. So we are very conscious of how different his energy is. All the other people in the house can kind of go all day, right? Although the manifesting generators kind of have a little bit more of like a start and stop. But my son, the projector, when he is around everybody, he's very much wired for sound, and he's like bouncing off the walls. When he goes into his own space, which he needs, because he needs that time to rest and regroup, right? That 80-20, 80% rest, 20% work. When he's not attached to all that generator energy, he starts to feel less than, because he's so used to feeling overstimulated that when he doesn't feel overstimulated, he starts to get stressed, because he's like, this doesn't feel right. This isn't normal for me. So he used to do a lot of acting out, where he'd come out of his room 15 times if he was supposed to be going to bed. I want a cup of water. I want this. I want that. We were like, what's going on? Like, the kid needs more rest than anybody. Why is he constantly, not following directions, not listening? And we realized that he had been so conditioned to this generator energy that we had to start to teach him how to own his projectorness. And so we started this new thing where each month we pick a different kid, and the whole family learns about that child's human design. So we really kind of give everybody, so in August, it was all about my son and him being a projector, and he's an emotional projector, and the kind of emotional projector that he is. So we learned all about that as a family, in a very, just like our youngest son has special needs, and the kids understand that he has special needs. William is a projector, and he has different needs. They're not, it's not in the same realm, but understanding that we don't make fun of, or we don't call out the things that make us different, but instead, how can we as a family come together to, to support this person? And aside from the unschooling aspect, when you go to a classroom, you've got discipline, you've got all these little, what's the word I'm looking for? Self-awareness things that they teach. Well, we do that here too. So we have this thing called the family clap. And anytime somebody does something great, somebody will say, family clap for Alana, and the whole family will clap in recognition of what that person just did. And that, in our house, that is the ultimate compliment. That is it's not a toy, it's not a candy, it's a family clap. If you get a family clap, you are grinning from ear to ear, because the entire family just recognized that you did something that was supportive of the entire team. And we call ourselves Team Westervelt, right? So when we go somewhere and the kids behave, we're like, oh my gosh, Team Westervelt, you guys were amazing, family clap for everyone. And they just yes, they love that. And that, to me, being able to instill self-confidence and self-pride just in being who we are, it's not something that really was prevalent in my generation. So I have a sister who's 11 years older than me, and she's older than you. So you and I consider the same generation. So that tells me that we probably had the same kind of parents who were raised by, who were not, but who were raised by parents who were very children should be seen and not heard. You know, like we're trying to get through the depression or whatever it was that our parents were doing. And so we have parents who kind of maybe were a little bit emotionally distant. And because of that, we grew up feeling like our emotions didn't matter. Our emotions were completely out of the equation from day one. It was like, oh, you don't feel well, stuff it down, who cares? Oh, you're sad? Well, nobody needs to know. Make sure you're not ruining anybody else's situation or anybody else's experience. So with us, we get to our generation and now all of a sudden it's like we are just completely over emotional with our kids, right? And so really learning how to back that up for myself and still give my children that ability to live their own lives. You know, like there are sometimes my daughter will be at Taekwondo and she's 10 and she'll be there and she'll just say the cringiest things to the other kids. And part of me like feels embarrassed for me, right? Like, oh my gosh, oh, that's so awkward. And part of me is like, no, that's her journey and it's okay. And so really kind of like being able to understand my daughter is a manifesting generator and she has a closed throat. So she's going to be the one who's out there trying to start things, right? She's got that manifestation energy. And I maybe don't feel comfortable from a mom perspective with that. And when I say comfortable, I don't mean she's doing anything wrong. I mean, like my insides are going like, oh, this is so awkward. I would never put myself out that way. But she does, you know? And so my son, like he has an emotional authority, which means that he feels his own emotions. And so the heck does everybody else. When my son is upset, it's like, you need to head for the hills. Whereas some of my kids, they have an open emotional center. And so actually 3 of my kids are emotional authorities and 2 are not. And the ones that are, it's like when they get upset, you just have to put headphones on and let them have their time, right? If you didn't know that about your kid, that they were an emotional authority, you might think that they had behavior issues, that they were always acting out, that they just had, you know, anger issues. But it's that they have an initial outburst and then they're fine. So if you know that, then you can make concessions for that. You can make room for that in your life and say, okay, well, if this kid's going to have outbursts all the time, then I'm going to make sure that my office is exactly as far away from that as possible. You know what I mean? And rather than making my children wrong for certain attributes that they have, helping them understand that it's part of their design, it takes away some of that like shame. You know, one of the things with my son, because he has these emotional outbursts, he gets really upset because whenever somebody, you know, criticizes him. And I noticed this really early. And I said to him, you know, here's what I want you to do. When somebody, we call it gets on to you in the South, when somebody gets upset with you and speaks to you, you know, I want you to just imagine yourself going into your heart, taking out what just happened, putting it next to you and saying, I'm not ashamed, I'm learning. I'm not ashamed, I'm learning. And he started to do this. And at one point, he actually taught my daughter, who started doing it. So now the kids, rather than like, oh gosh, I just got spoken to, what does this mean about me? From the moment they were born, my kids have or, you know, from the moment that they were aware, my kids understand that just because somebody gets upset with you doesn't mean anything bad about you. All it means is that the behavior needs to be corrected. And we're only doing that because we want you to have a good life. So they're very well adjusted in that way. And we do a lot of emotional awareness. And to be honest, I think at this age, that's just as, if not more important than the academics, because the academics, they're going to learn that stuff, you know, but this is what they need to have that foundational energy from their parents to know this is who I am. This is who I was here to be. And just like you wouldn't criticize a child for being diabetic. Oh, wow, your body doesn't make insulin. Wow, what a loser you are. Nobody would ever do that. So why would we then chastise a child who doesn't have the capacity to feel worthiness because they have an open heart center? You know, like, oh, well, you just need to know that you're good enough. Well, but I don't, and I never will. So how can you give me tools to help me know this or to help me believe this despite not feeling it? And so that's kind of some of the work that we do as parents in the human design realm.
Oh, I love what I love everything, every single word you just said. Thank you so much. I mean, this is so crucial. This is so essential what you just said. And um, I totally agree that this the fundamental basics I feel I want to make sure that my kid has and owns is a good emotional one, a good an emotional foundation, so he knows who he is and he knows how he can relate to others best, so he is served and the others are served. And everything else, I totally agree, everything else, all this cognitive learning, I mean, this happens anyway, especially if you know who you are and if you know how to relate to others.
Absolutely.
And this is such this you know, and when we look at school, what I tend to see a lot is the other way around. A lot of bullying, no awareness of how to relate each other, no awareness of who the kids are themselves, but trying to put knowledge in and have them to spit it out again.
Oh, absolutely. My stepchildren, who I told you before we started talking, you know, they're not big fans of me for a lot of reasons. But one of the things that, you know, they were upset with me this week, and most of them are adults now, and they went on Facebook and started body shaming me. Like, that is how they cope. You know, like they're in the public school system. They very much see that, you know, whatever isn't like us isn't good. And all my friends and all my coworkers are like, "Oh my gosh, did you see what they were saying?" And I'm like, whatever. Like, what are they going to do to me? I, however, feel bad that this is how they feel they need to deal with
Yes.
conflict and confrontation. But it just shows the difference between the way
Mm-hmm.
they're raised, the way that they're parented, and the way that my kids are parented, you know?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And then if we project that onto the society, I mean, you know, we can see where it goes to, and then we see where it has gone, where it
Right.
has brought us to. And yeah, so well, I really want to thank you. I mean, not only that you speak to me and all of us with that, also that you simply do it. You know, you simply do it. And
yeah, and I think the biggest thing is that we have to stop looking at unschooling as a deficit. We have to stop looking at it the way that society makes it seem, like it's because you're lazy or because you can't bother to, you know, do the homeschooling. I've done the traditional homeschooling. I've done the lesson plans and all and it's fun. It's fun. Don't get me wrong. Like, it's fun to play pipe cleaners and all that stuff. But at the end of the day, really tapping into what your child wants to learn and nurturing that. You know, Malcolm Gladwell has a book, and he talks about 10,000 hours, right? And so children have the capacity and the ability to really start honing whatever it is that they're here to do. And it's funny, it comes back to what I do as a coach, because I'm the dream design coach, right? I help people truly connect to what they desire so that they can use that to build their dream lives and manifest infinite income and amazing relationships. But going back to childhood, whatever it is on your heart to create from the time you're little, that is what source, God, higher power, the universe has for you to do to create more wholeness in the world. So the fact that it feels good for you means that it's what you're supposed to do. And if we can get our kids to tap into that from an early age and be so convicted in who they are and what they're here to do from that age, and not have to have this awkward, you know, realization, kind of a lifting of the veil, jarring thing when they get to, you know, whatever, adolescence or adulthood. What a gift that is. What a gift that is, you know? And So I think that the more that we nurture them as individuals and let them be in charge of their journey, obviously with caution, like nobody's saying let them, just go when they're 4 into the kitchen and figure out how to use knives, like obviously using caution, but more from a guide perspective and less from kind of like a warden perspective. I really, truly, genuinely believe that we will change the vibration of this planet, the trajectory of this species, and the fairy tale love story that is humanity and what it could do and where it could end up.
Yeah, and actually I see that this kind of approach also challenges us adults even more. Because if we want to guide our kids in that kind of way, we are challenged to keep growing and to keep elevating and to keep being on top of our own expression of our creativity. Because
and
if
be
we
very public
don't,
about that to our children. It's very
yes,
important that we share that journey with them and that we don't do it in the closet.
exactly, because if we don't, if we hide or if we don't do it at all, they don't see what what this means. They need an inspiration, they need the observation, they need the energy to dock onto, to be around to. And they wouldn't learn to walk if they wouldn't see anyone to walk. They wouldn't learn to talk if they wouldn't hear and listen to anyone who talks. So this is true for everything else, and so this keeps us challenged to grow ourselves. And this is actually the most healthy and also rewarding environment we can put ourselves as a family.
Absolutely, 100%. And we will benefit from it, and they will benefit from it, and society will benefit from it, and humanity will benefit from it.
Absolutely. For me, for you, for us thing, right? So
Absolutely. I didn't even think of that, but yes. Melanie, you are here in spirit, love.
Yes. Yes, thank you. So, in an ideal world, like not only in your family, but like in an entire world, how would you dream, or how would how would it be to bring up children, to raise children? What is your ideal?
I mean, I think we've done a pretty darn close job to what I would have wanted. I think if, money was no object, maybe we would spend more time, in remote locations and stuff like that. But by and large, I genuinely believe that I really feel like we're doing it right. I really do. And every day I say to the other day I was in my office and my kids were saying something and my son was like, I'm going to manifest this Lego set. And I'm like, and that's just their vernacular. They just speak in terms of the law of attraction. They've never known anything other than that. To bring up children in this way that are so grounded in reality and yet so quantumly fluent is, I can't even tell you what it feels like, because if I was to die tomorrow, they are already evolved, confident creatures that are going to change the world. If today was my last day, like we've already established so much of that with them, and they love it. They're not isolated in any way. They go to Taekwondo, they see their brother go in and out of therapy and things like that. And they see people, we take them places. Their grandparents live right up the road, but they're not of the world. They don't have cell phones. They don't have tablets. They watch movies. My daughter, I was telling you the other day, my daughter watched a movie about flat earthers, right? And everything that proved that the earth is flat. And then my husband turned on one that proves that the earth is round. And then he looked at her and he said, both are true. And then he explained about quantum reality. And now she understands that, or as much as a 10-year-old can understand that. But, they aren't products of the construct that society has created. They are people, they are souls that exist in a world that construct exists, but they don't live inside that construct. Now, my husband's kids, they're 100% construct. Every word out of their mouth is something they read on an article or on Facebook or saw on YouTube. You know, they don't have that. I mean, it sounds awful, but they don't have that ability to think like that. They don't have schools don't even teach inferencing anymore, you know? Like, there's a tree in the living room and it has a bunch of ornaments on it and there are presents under it. What does this mean? They don't teach that anymore. They don't teach children how to think anymore. So a lot of children don't think, you know? And so, to be honest with you, I genuinely believe I really wouldn't change too much. I mean, like I said, if money was no object, really just getting to take them to crazy places and do incredible things, hang upside down with the monkeys or something, sure. But other than that, I really genuinely believe we did it right.
And what a cool thing to say, huh? And I didn't
realize it till you said it.
You're not even half through the path, right? So how beautiful is that? And if you look at society, like really big, not only you as a family, but like, if you would be the politician of education for the entire planet, do you have any kind of visions? How would it be?
Well, I think that anytime you overhaul anything, you end up with other problems because, and I'm not a civil engineer to figure out how to do this, but if you dismantle the education system as it is and you make it so that people only go if they want to, right? Then you've still got all these people who are sending their kids because it is that daycare piece. But then you've also got this elitism of like, well, people who are sending their kids are people who want their kids to learn a certain thing. And then it creates a divide. So I don't really know what the answer would be. All I know is that I very much believe in the quantum field and I believe in my own reality. And there are people that can think outside of their own reality. And to them, I say, take it, have it, go figure it out. But for me, just being able to influence this piece of reality and then to share with people like you so you can be inspired to go and take some of this and maybe write an article about it or get ideas, or maybe you go start a new unschooling program in Austria, like that's enough for me. But to overhaul it on a greater level, I mean, there's so many factors that go into that. And it's holding up so many other pieces of infrastructure that you would then have to dismantle. And quite frankly, I don't have the energy for that. That's my generator talking. I'm like, that does not light me up.
Oh yeah, it's fun. Yeah, it's like I offered you a new job, right? Oh my God! No,
yeah,
please no.
I'm for a bunch of people who don't really want me to touch it either.
I have a question about how is it in Georgia to do unschooling? Do you have, is it legal? Do you have to, what do you have to do in order to do that?
Yeah, so in Georgia, what we have to do is we have to be able to furnish a attendance record that shows that we've taught our kids 180 or whatever it is, I don't know how many days it is, from the time that they turn 6 years old. And every 3 years, we are required to have them do a standardized test online that we keep on file in the event that they want to see it. And they have to give you notice before they come and see it. So you kind of have time to go have your kid take the test. Now, my kids take the test anyway, just because I like to see kind of like where the holes are. But that's how it is in Georgia. There are other states that are very different, but Georgia's pretty cool. Now, I will say that we did have a situation a couple years ago where something terrible happened, and some people that were homeschooling, their kids got pulled out of school and then they showed up dead. So, and this was down the street from my house. So of course the government went into like overdrive and it started to kind of come after the homeschoolers, and we were all freaking out and like, oh my gosh. And turns out, you know, luckily we have a lot of the HLSDA, or the homeschool. We have, in the United States, we have a agency that protects us. You pay like $10 a month, and they will take any case. They very vehemently protect homeschoolers. So they went right after them. They backed down, but they were talking about regulating homeschool. One of the other things is that a lot of times, you know, like in Alaska, will actually pay you to homeschool. They will give you funds, but you have to be careful. Whenever you hear subsidizing homeschool, that means they want to tell you how to do it. They want to regulate it. So a lot of questions will say, do you think that federal funding should be available to homeschoolers? And then people say yes. And then they're like, great, we want you to do this. We want to know what you're doing. We want to, you know, it's like when you go to get, when I was, you know, first married, my husband was in the military and we didn't have a lot of money. And we went to go find out about WIC. And WIC wants you to get blood tests, and they want to make sure you have your vaccinations and all these other things, and they are in your business. So it's like, if you want support from the industrial complex, they want control. Support equals control. So you have to decide, do I want support, or do I want to be controlled and get support, or do I want to figure it out on my own and be on my own? So it really depends on kind of like what your level of freedom that you're comfortable with. But to answer your question, it's not illegal, but I would venture to say that it's probably not the way that people think people should do it around here. And, you know, heaven forbid CPS shows up or something and they ask your kids like, oh, what are you doing in school? Well, we don't do school. We do homeschool. Like there's definitely, or unschool, you know, there's definitely a possibility that that could be a problem. But as long as you're following the rules, there's not really much they can do. And there's so many other people out there that are really, really messing up kids that I don't know that that's necessarily the thing they want to take on. But we say, you know, in these states, we have a saying, your mileage may vary, right? Like it really depends, like what it is that you do. And also, if you live in Georgia, you're probably not going to start an unschooling podcast and talk about how, and my kids never do, you know, like you kind of just like keep it very, what's the word I'm looking for? Vague.
So what an honor to have you here.
Oh. Well, I mean, it's been amazing being here, and I hope that you've gotten some insight of kind of what it looks like in the States, but also some confidence of just how powerful it can be if you give yourself permission to do it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Maybe one last question, AmyLee.
Yeah.
If someone watches our talk and maybe isn't, like, the kids are very little still, and the parents are thinking about schooling, unschooling, homeschooling, all those different options, what would you suggest?
If your kids are still really little, I would just start to practice having fun learning with them. There is nothing like seeing your kid learn something for the first time. I mean, you know how it feels when they walk and when they talk. Well, when they tell you something is a star or something is blue, there's nothing like that. So I would just say, start to get comfortable with learning with your child. You know, get excited about the questions that they ask. Don't let it stress you out. There will be times when you're doing something and your kid will ask a million questions. Recognizing how amazing it is that they have that ability. And then, you know, if you're in the middle of something saying, I want to answer all your questions, I'm actually in the middle of something, can we set a timer and I will come back when I finish up this and I'll answer all the questions you have, you know, any ones that I can. And not being afraid to let your kids know that you don't know everything. You know, I think one of the biggest things that I've done for my kids is to let them know my struggle. Like, I have social anxiety. So when the 5 of them, or the 4 of them, because my little guy is, you know, stationary, but when the 4 of them are all around me, and I have to go in my room, you know, I will say to them, okay, guys, mommy needs some time, right? Like mommy needs to be in her own energy right now. And that doesn't mean anything about you guys. When I'm ready to come back out, I will. And at first I was like, you know, who am I to do that? They're my kids, blah, blah, blah. And then I'm like, but what happens when my daughters grow up and they feel like they don't have the ability to go and have their, because I'm an introvert. You may not know that because I'm kind of outgoing, but I need my recharging space. And my husband's really good about protecting that for me. But also we have to model that for our kids, you know, like the other day we were driving somewhere and my kids are like, the fair's coming, the fair's coming. And I'm like, listen, I'm so excited to talk to you about the fair. And I'm super stressed out about a deadline that I have and I'm trying to talk to a client and that's not your fault. But if I don't seem that super excited, like we just hyper communicate. You know what I mean? Just be very, very clear about how things are so that they don't have any room to take it to mean something about them. And that goes such a long way. People don't realize how much letting your children know that whatever you're upset about isn't about them. Just that extra little thing can save them from years of imprinted trauma with a little t that they just don't have to have. And my kids, by and large, don't have that because we take the time to clean it up in the moment. I don't even know if that was a question. What did you, I don't even.
It's beautiful. It's beautiful, whatever you say. And and it's going that way, which I find is really, really important, because if we as a parent, and we start usually with no experiencing in unschooling because none of us has done it for or has experienced it for themselves. So it's always a new journey. It's always something we really get newly into. And what you just said is basically, in my experience and in my personal and the one when I'm observing others, is we need to be really, really conscious about ourselves doing that. It's less about the kids. It's less about what we do with the kids or like to have them learn, but it's much more to be really, really, really aware how we lead the relationships with them.
Yes,
and
absolutely.
how we model relating to each other.
Yeah, I call
And
it
there
growth
is a lot
from
of
microscope.
de-learning and, you know, deconditioning going on within ourselves to create this empty and free and loving and deliberate space for both of us, or for everybody involved to open up, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, and really recognizing that everybody's here on their own journey in their own right, that there isn't, you know, this authoritarian of like, well, I'm the mom, so I said so. It's like, I will go into great detail about why I said so and why this is important and what would happen if I didn't do that, because I believe that they need to know those things so they can make better decisions, so they can grow as people. You know, I want them to be whole people. I don't want them to be chunks of energy that I took bites out of to satisfy trauma that I went through. You know, that's not fair to them. And I'm not going to perpetuate that cycle. You hear all the time in the woo-woo spaces, right? The cycle stops with me. But it does. It does. And don't get me wrong, I still have outbursts. Like don't anyone watching this think that I'm amazing, like that, you know, I'm perfect. I have outbursts. I've told my kids, "Oh my God, can you just leave me alone?" But again, it's how you deal with it in the aftermath. It's how you go, "Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry I said that." Or, "Hey, can you come here for a minute? Look, just now I got onto you, or I just had an outburst and this is why, and I'm sorry." Being able to just clean those things up. Nobody expects anybody to be perfect, but taking accountability, explaining emotional energy is huge. You know, I mean, what a difference it makes for a child between mom's mad at me because I'm bad and mom's mad at me because mom had a bad day. You know, what does the difference in that? I mean, it's
a lot. Yeah, it's
thousands of dollars in therapy for sure.
It's everything. Yeah. And the first thing I want to disagree in our talk is you are amazing.
Thank you.
You might not be perfect, but you are amazing. Thank you.
Well, I received that and I really appreciate it.
And thank you for joining me on this talk and taking your time and having us, look into your little world and your family and having watched and observed that. This is really, I loved it. I loved our talk. Thank you so much.
I
And I
did
love
too.
this last note to myself: do not take bites out of your children. Yes.
I will make a note of that.
Oh yeah. So yeah, thank you.
Absolutely. Thanks so much for having me. Let me know if you guys have any questions, or if you need any follow-up questions answered. I'm here.
Thank you so much. Oh, I'm listening. I'm hearing something
Yep,
is
that's my little
yeah.
guy. He's coming
Yeah.
out. He's up
Okay.
from his nap.
Okay.
Perfect timing. Bye.
Bye.